So as you can see, what's in front of me today, we're going to be talking about fishing gear. And I am a bit of a fish molester, as Ryan Avery would say. I really like fishing, but I just stick with high alpine lake fishing, creeks, streams. That's kind of my deal. I fly fish as well, but what we're going to cover today is literally just what we use for backpacking setups for high alpine lakes. You don't need to spend a ton of money on this. Luckily, I think I have behind me a budget of $100 to $200. The biggest thing you need to remember, I go pretty lightweight, so I get a 4-piece rod. I've got a few in front of me. I'll go over those in a second. I usually get a fast action to a medium action. And what that means with a fast action is the last part of the tip is the only one that bends. I can usually yard whatever I'm using, yard it out a little bit farther as far as casting goes. And anyway, so medium to fast action, 4-piece, and you want a 6 to 6'6" rod is usually my suggestion. As far as packing that in, a lot of times I don't put it in a tube or a sock or anything else. Sometimes I'll use like an arrow tube if I'm going in to protect it. But either way, you want to go pretty dang lightweight. A lot of times we're hiking in several miles for fishing to get to remote lakes. Sometimes we're bushwhacking in where there's no trail. So either way, 6 foot to 6'6", 4-piece. Medium to fast action is my suggestion. As far as rods go, I've got a few in front of me. This one here I have used for years. I think this one's almost 20 years old. This is a Daiwa Spinmatic 4-piece, not expensive. These are like 50 bucks on Amazon. Again, this one I've had for a long time. And this one here does not say the action on it, I don't think. It just says 1/32 to 1/4 ounce, 2 to 6 pound test. So as I said before, going lightweight, I generally run 4-pound test on my reel. Occasionally I'll go up to 6 pound, generally never run 2, but 4 to 6 pound test. So pretty ultra lightweight reels as well. Over here, this is a little bit more of an expensive setup. Not horrible, but this is a St. Croix Triumph 4-piece. This, I'll just read this off here. I think it's 160 bucks, 150 bucks. It is a 6-foot light power fast action. And this is a 4 to 8 pound test, 1/16 to 5/16 ounce. The reality with this is you don't need to spend a ton of money. I could not tell you the difference fishing between these two as far as like geeking out on it. They both catch fish. This one's just cooler because it's more money. Buy the Daiwa Spinmatic unless you just want to support St. Croix because they're a good company in Wisconsin. Represent. And then this one over here is a custom rod a dude made for me. It's a little bit taller. It's a 7-footer, 4-piece. Great rod. A little bit stiffer. Definitely more of a fast action rod. All of these reels are that 2 to 6 pound test spool. When I say that, you could put 8 to 10 pound test. You'll get about 50 yards on the thing. They're very ultra lightweight setups. So I'm running again 4-pound test, but they're set up for 2 to 6 pounds. This one here is a Quantum. I've had really good luck with this. You can see it's super small, ultra lightweight, and I've got 4-pound test on there. This one here, and I'm gonna bash this. It's a Okuma, maybe Okuma, O-K-U-M-A. Again, a little bit more expensive, this one, but biggest thing, just read the reviews. Don't buy a piece of shit, and make sure your reel marries up to your rod, meaning the size of line. This one, same thing. This is actually a 4 to 8 pound, more of a setup, but I have got 4-pound test on all of these. So like I said on the 4 to 6 pound test thing, when you go to the line, do you run mono or fluoro? If you get on fishing forums and stuff, people go off the deep end on that stuff. Generally for a high alpine lake, I'm running fluoro. It's a little bit harder for the fish to see. There is reasons you could run mono. This Halo, I've had really good luck with this. I think this is 6 pound. I usually carry a backup spool with me when I go in. But usually you're gonna run fluoro because those high alpine lakes a lot of times are super clear. It's harder for the fish to see the line. As far as bringing in leader, like tippet, I'm generally gonna run a 6 or a 7X leader. And when I say that, I hardly ever even use this. Meaning the reason I run 4-pound test is I don't need to bump down to like a 4 or 2 pound leader depending upon what I'm running for a lure, meaning I'm running 4-pound test, even if I'm running a fly and a torpedo bobber. I'll go over that in a minute. So I do bring in some 6 or 7X tippet depending upon what I'm doing, but I'll go over what I use that for here in a minute. So recap, 4-piece, you definitely want that. 2-piece, even a 2-piece kind of sucks getting it through the brush, especially if you're bushwhacking in. You want to run a medium to fast action. Don't have to spend a ton of money. I would say 50 bucks on the rod, 50 bucks on the reel, somewhere in there, unless you want to just get super geeked out. And then I'd run fluoro, again, a little bit harder. Those high alpine lakes, pretty clear, so line's a little bit harder for the fish to see. And then again, 6 or 7X tippet. 7X is 2 pound, and that's if I get really finicky fish and you know, so I need to run a smaller leader, or I'm doing some fly fishing with a torpedo bobber. Now, the only thing I'll add, I'm not covering actual fly fishing in any of this. That's a totally separate thing. What I'm going to run or talk about is how to fly fish without having to actually use a fly rod when you're in a high alpine lake, and I'll cover that here in a minute. Any questions on this? You can find pretty much all this shit on Amazon, which is great, but we're gonna move on now to the actual lures that I use while I'm high alpine lake fishing, and this has been through pretty much every Western state. I use the same thing, and I'll go over that now. So now I'm gonna go over the lures and the tackle that I use. Back when I was broke as a joke, which wasn't that long ago, I really just had one tackle box about this big that had everything that I owned inside of it, and I did just fine. But now I've gained more fishing tackle, so I have a larger tackle box, or a larger container with multiple tackle boxes inside. And then when I go into, depending upon where I'm going fishing, what I'll do is I'll pull these out and I'll transfer what I need from one box into a smaller one, because I have to carry that shit in. And so I'm gonna have a smaller box like I used to have with everything I own. So in these are my flies. And then over here, I've just got different boxes of spinners. This is just weights, hooks, swivels, the good stuff, Pistol Pete's, Marabou jigs, Rapalas. It's like a taco stand in there, and some different spinners. So I'm gonna go over each one of these at a time. So first, I'm gonna knock out Rapalas. I have used those since I was a little fat kid in Oregon in the 80s. They work great. So I'm gonna go over those first, transition into spinners, and just kind of move forward of what I pack in. The thing that you need to remember, just like when you're backpacking, when you're going over your backpacking gear, is overpacking is something you really don't want to do fishing. Like the good idea fairy tells you, oh, I could lose 17 lures, and next thing you know, you got 6 pounds of shit for fishing that you don't need. So I try to be pretty selective with that. So I'm going to set this aside, and what I'm going to do is, as I'm choosing the lures and I'm going over them, I'm just going to set them over here. By the time I'm done, I'm going to have a little pile here of what I would pack into a high alpine lake, and I'll just go through each of them at a time. So we're gonna do Rapalas first. Slide this over. And it's funny, for years I called them Rapala. I guess that's the wrong way to say it, because I actually hung out with people that actually geek up on fishing, and it was like I kissed their sister. So it's actually Rapala, not Rapala. So you've got a lot of different options when it comes to Rapalas. So like this little guy here, you've got the spinner in the front, which isn't the standard, but I always pack one of these with me. This is more of a rainbow, like a trout looking one, so I'm definitely gonna take that in. The next thing, depending upon if I'm going into a really big lake, is gonna be the size of the Rapala. So like the lake that Steven and I went into last year, one of them had massive fish, and so I was actually yarding out some pretty big Rapalas. So I'm definitely going to grab a couple of this size, and I don't have the sizes all memorized. This might be a number 5, but I've got a couple of sizes here. This one actually is not going to be as deep of a diver. So with Rapalas, on the countdowns, they're going to sink about 1 foot a second, give or take. So I'm going to grab at least one countdown, one couple floaters, whatever else. I've got a couple Brokeback Mountains here, so I've got the Brokebacks, and I'm going to have a countdown and a floater. And then I've got, you know, you always want to probably grab one really bright one in case like the water's pretty murky or dirty. And I've got a few different ones here. In reality, the farther you hike in, the better the fishing's gonna be because the fish are stupider, so it doesn't matter as much. But I've got a few here. I'm gonna call that good. Actually, I'm gonna throw a little blue guy in here. This thing's pretty dang tiny. The thing that you'll have happen when you're going into the alpine lakes or whatever is sometimes, depending upon when you're going in, you may hit a stream coming out that has some different pockets, and these will work really good on those streams at times where I'm running something a little bit smaller. So I've got an assortment over here. Just remember, don't yard out these giant Rapalas when you're going in unless you know the lake is super, super deep. Get an average size and get a couple that are countdowns, a couple floaters, maybe one that's like a broke back. And again, and this one with that spinner, I've had really good luck with that, so I always try to carry one of those. So not a ton of different stuff, and honestly, I could probably cut that in half. Unless you're just running, if you're really careful, you're not going to lose that much equipment unless you're just running on the ragged edge into a boulder field underwater and losing a ton of stuff. So again, that's why you'll bring a floater sometimes, is to get away from like losing your lure. So if you're careful, you may not even need this much stuff. But there's my pile of Rapalas. Now I'm going to go over spinners. And I definitely have more spinners than I probably need. But anybody that you ask, the number one spinner is generally going to be a Panther Martin. A Blue Fox spinner are going to be the top two. And then rooster tails, things like that. So I have a pile of different spinners in here. So I just grab a few different sizes, a few different colors, and go from there. So that's a Blue Fox right here. I'm gonna grab one of those. It's got a little bit here on the treble hook, so a little bit of flare in there. And again, nothing too crazy. This is yellow with red dot, Panther Martin. I've got a few of those. I must really like those. I'm just, again, gonna grab an assortment. Colors and sizes. I don't know what that is, but it looks cool. Grab one of those. So I'm always going to, as well, grab a few that are a little bit bigger in that 1/4 to 5/16 ounce, especially if we hit an alpine lake that is a little bit bigger. Like the one last year we hit was probably 100, 150 foot deep, and we ended up yarding out shit for muskies and doing pretty well with it. So this is more of a, I guess, a bronze or whatever, Blue Fox. Going to grab one of those. Black Panther Martin. Ooh, I got one of them already. Make sure I grab a silver one. I don't know what company makes that, but that's got a little fly treble hook on the end. I feel confident I would catch something with that. Again, I always try to grab a few bright ones in case the water's pretty murky. So I don't know what company makes that either. That's not a Blue Fox. Either way, going to bring that in as well. And the various sizes thing, same deal. You want to just stay somewhere in that 1/4 ounce or less size. On the back side here, because this is actually what I usually pack in with me, I've got more Rapalas. I got a crawdad here. I've got a bunch of different little Rapalas inside here. I already went over those though. And then I'm going to grab some super small ones just in case. So again, not a ton of different, not a lot of variety, just different colors of Panther Martin and Blue Fox spinners. I'm going to go ahead and kind of dig this out, separate a few things. We'll pop the camera back on. So I've got a little pile here, again, of Blue Fox, Panther Martin spinners, 1/4 to 5/16 ounce. I've got Rapalas, different sizes. Now I'm going to kind of shift over to like a marabou jig. I didn't use those a lot when I was younger, but I've had great luck with them as time has gone on, and it really just depends on the situation you're fishing. So I've got a bunch of different marabou jigs in here, and it's the same shit, different day. I'm going to grab some darker ones. I'm going to grab some brighter ones depending upon the color. These work extremely when, like, it seems like when all else fails, a marabou jig or a pistol Pete or a woolly booger or something like that. So with this, obviously with Rapalas and spinners, pretty simple. You cast the bitch out and you reel it back in. Where with a marabou jig, I'm kind of popping it more and I'm letting that kind of puff out. It looks more like a leech, I guess, or whatever. So with a marabou jig, I've got a pretty good weight on there to yard it out. With a pistol Pete, I'll go over that in a minute. I'm going to use a torpedo bobber. But I'm going to grab a couple marabou jigs. Again, bright ones, a couple dark ones. And I've got all these separated in different boxes. And again, I take out what I need from each box, get a pile, and then I put that in a separate box. Sometimes these little plastics will work pretty good. I don't use these as much, but I'll throw a couple of those in there. There, we should be good to go. So the marabou jig is going to go straight to my main line, 4-pound test, tie it right on, yard it out. When I go to like a pistol Pete or some type of a fly, it's going to be a totally different setup. So if I don't want to try fly fishing, I don't want to risk going into an alpine lake where I'm going to have high winds, what I'm going to do is run a torpedo bobber. And there's different types of torpedo bobbers. There's basically the kind that looks like this and has an eyelet on each end. And then you have this one that has like the surgical tubing in the middle. And that's why I like to run the 4-pound test. As I run that 4-pound test through, I get about 5 feet of leader off the back end or the front end. And then you can put water inside this thing to cast out farther. And then you twist that surgical cord up. That stops the line. You can throw that water in there basically to yard it out even farther. And then again, I'm just running the line that is on my reel, meaning 4-pound test. So if you can imagine, rod, line comes through, I got about 5 foot a leader here, and then I'm gonna run on that, depending, something like this, a pistol Pete. And anybody that's done any fishing in high alpine lakes, these things are deadly. And I slow roll these. So the 4-pound test is hooked here. I yard that out and I am cranking super slow, and that prop is just barely spinning. Occasionally I'll pop it a little bit, but when in doubt, like if fish aren't hitting off top water, if you've got some high wind and you're running, especially when you're going with big fish, a pistol Pete works amazing. So I'm gonna grab a few pistol Petes. There we go, one more. And then with that same system, I'm going to also bring some dry flies, some bead-headed brassies, things like that. So if you're not a fly fisherman, if you don't know what you're doing, you can still, maybe not quite as well, but you can still fly fish and get, you know, the good things out of running a fly and compared to a spinner, that more natural look with a torpedo bobber. So with those, this is a pistol Pete. I can run some streamers. I can run, like, you've got woolly boogers, things like that, off of that torpedo bobber without having to yard out, again, bringing in a fly rod. So I'm going to bring a few just regular flies in. Look at that fucking crazy thing. All right, we're going to bring that just because it's different. And then I'm going to grab out of my normal fly box. I'm probably going to just grab a few different flies and then throw it in one of these when I bring it in. So I'll generally, again, I'm going to run like an Irresistible, Royal Coachman, things like that, just normal flies, elk hair caddis, whatever, and it'll run off that 5 to 6 foot leader off of my torpedo bobber. Another thing that you can do is you can run like a dropper. So you can run on your torpedo bobber. So I've got my rod here, my line comes down through, torpedo bobber, 5 foot a leader. I can go above that torpedo bobber, maybe 18 inches towards my rod, and then I can run a dropper fly off of that. I can go into that in a more detailed video, but what I'm gonna do is go about 18 inches up, 2 foot up from my torpedo bobber, and I'm gonna hook like an 8 to 10 inch line off of that, and I'm gonna run like a mayfly or something, and I can bounce that off the top of the water. So I may have like a nymph or a bead-headed brassie off that 5 foot leader. Then above my torpedo bobber, I'm gonna run a dropper where I can bounce that, especially if I'm on like a boulder field, I can bounce that dry fly off and get a lot more play out of it. I'll go into that in a more in-depth video, but that works extremely well. And then again, these are just my normal fly fishing flies that I have in here, but I'm able to do that with that torpedo bobber, and that works really well when you're backpacking in, and you're worried about maybe if you just got into fly fishing or high wind or whatever else, because you can yard one of these out about spool a damn ultra lightweight system. So like you can cast way farther out than you could with a fly rod. And again, run a dry fly, just slow roll it back in. And that may be, you know, in the evening, the winds died down and they're just hitting off topwater like crazy and they're hitting dries. And again, I'm gonna run like any kind of a nymph, bead-headed brassy. I'm gonna bring in some dry flies, some streamers, the pistol peats, woolly boogers, and I'll run that off this torpedo bobber. This is something I learned from my dad when I was a kid. It works extremely well in those alpine lakes. So kind of a once over here because I'm talking 100 miles an hour. If you haven't figured it out, like I just kind of throw a bunch of different crap into a fishing tackle box, backpack in. The farther I go, the fishing gets better. But I want some Rapalas, countdowns, and floaters. I'm going to have some Panther Martins, some Blue Fox spinners, some Cast Masters or spoons or whatever. Pistol Peats, a few torpedo bobbers, I'm good to go, right? As far as flies go, like I talked about running that torpedo bobber setup, and when we're actually backpacking in, we'll go over this quite a bit more. That torpedo bobber setup is going to allow me to run like an Irresistible, Renegades, whatever dry flies. I can also run the Pistol Peats. These things are super deadly. So I've got quite a bit of stuff that I'm going to be bringing in, and I'm always going to bring in an extra backup spool of 4-pound or 6-pound fluoro in case I get a bad bird's nest, something happens. I don't want to be all the way in there with a pole. It's like having a gun with no bullets. So I always bring in a backup spool. Fly wise, I'm going to have one tackle box, something like this, or this double-sided dealy whopper with my main tackle with the spinners and Rapalas. I'm going to have kind of an ultra lightweight fly box for the Pistol Peats and the bead-headed brassies, things like that. And I'm good to go. So that is when I'm backpacking in to go just fishing. When I am bringing a survival kit in, it's much more basic and there's not a lot to it. I bring basically a pill bottle, and my survival kit is going to consist of just flies, because it's not like I'm going to be able to yard out a Rapala with a stick and bring it in very easy. So I'm going to be, inside of this is going to have just a few different flies, and generally it's going to be like a bead-headed brassy, a bead-headed prince, something like that. So I'll open this up and kind of show, and then Steven can zoom in over my shoulder after, and I'll just grab a few of the flies. A San Juan worm is never a bad idea. Of what I would bring in, I'm generally going to bring in smaller hooks on my survival kit. So I'm going to have a few different, again, like bead-headed brassies. I'm going to have a couple split shot, and then I'm going to end up just having a spool of 6-pound tests. When I say a spool, what I'll do is I'll grab like a separate spool of line that's empty. You can grab them off Amazon, and I'll just yard in, a spool on, 20 yards or something on that. And then when I'm in there, and I say survival, but like if we're bow hunting and we hit some stream or some small pond that's got a bunch of brookies in it, we're just going to cut down, a stick, and we're going to tenkara the shit out of it, right? We're going to Lance Banning it to death, and we'll be out there just bobbing bead-headed brassies. So that's my survival kit. I don't get too serious with that, but I just dropped a split shot inside of a pill bottle, drop these flies in there, and off I go. And as far as the line goes, like I said, you can buy these empty spools of line, or empty spools to put line on Amazon, and I'll just roll around 6-pound test on that. I know a lot of guys will do that just on the pill bottle. They'll spin that up on there and then just tape it in a couple spots. Again, when in the land of the blind, one man is king. If you have 10 yards of fishing line and 3 types of like wet flies or nymphs or whatever, you're going to be in good shape. Brookies aren't that hard to catch, and you'll be able to eat fish that night. So that would be like my survival kit. But other than that, yeah, I mean, this is what I've used for years. My tackle has gotten to be more and more as time goes on, but all of this stuff works really well in those alpine lakes, and hopefully we'll get a chance to film some actual fishing trips this year.